Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Jemima Birkis, your host. Now, Namibia continues to be a champion of press freedom. However, police aggression is rearing its ugly head, and poor working conditions is also becoming a growing concern, and has been highlighted in the latest Media AfroBarometer launched by the FES Media recently. Now, today we are speaking to Freya Gruenhagen, head of FES, Freya Ebenhard Stiftung, Namibia, and FES Media Africa, as well as Dickson Kasote, the FES Media manager, program manager. Thank you for joining me today, Dickson and Freya.
Thank you so much, Jemima, for inviting us.
Okay. As we go into the interview, can you just give us an overview of FES Media's work and in promoting press freedom and the work of journalists?
Thank you so much, Jemima. So I think since many people might not know about FES Media, let me give a little bit of an introduction. FES Media Africa is part of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung family. Overall, we are having 106 offices in, I don't know how many countries, so many countries. And here in Namibia, we are actually having two offices. So the normal FES Namibia and FES Media Africa. FES Media Africa, however, is very different because we are actually looking into the region and we're looking into the issue of media freedom, as you already indicated. And we are doing that by really focusing actually on three overall lines of work. The first one being access to information, or the right to information, or actually the freedom of information, because this is closely interlinked with freedom of expression for obvious reasons. So freedom of information, we've been pursuing this working line very many years, for more than 2 decades, I think, together with APAI, which is our strongest partner in the region when it comes to this kind of work, African Platform for Access to Information. And this has been a strong working line, and it came with obviously lots of lobbying work, but also additionally very much political advisory work in that we looked at legal frameworks, and last but not least, obviously also public discussions and a little bit of training. Maybe I can say a few words about that later on. Our second pillar is what you already mentioned, the Africa Media Barometer. So we've been doing already 127 in the course since 2004, together with our partner Misa, Media Institute for Southern Africa. I think we talk about that now, so let me keep short here in this regard. And the last one actually is something that we just embarked on: digital rights, digital spaces, and the access to information within these spaces. So in that regard, we did a couple of papers, discussion papers. Already, by now there are already 9, I think, and we are looking forward to organizing a huge regional conference next year. Obviously, you will be invited, and actually looking more closely into the issues that are emanating here in the region around digital spaces.
Thank you so much, Freya. So before we go to Dickson, can you just elaborate a little more on your work with Misa in the region?
Sure.
And then also you spoke about advising political leaders. Also just give us a little bit of overview on that.
Sure. So with Misa, our cooperation really has focused and centered around the Africa Media Barometer. And in doing so, I think we have really been quite successful. So we are basically the conveners for the AMBs. That's the abbreviation. Africa Media Barometer is too long all the time. And what we are doing is, yes, we are convening, we are coordinating the process, but we are also following up. So it's basically the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung offices in the region who are doing the work together with Misa. And then later on, we talk about that, I think, when there are the recommendations, you need to follow up on the process all the time. And in doing so, this is when success can come in. And we do have a couple of success stories around that. For example, in Nigeria and in Malawi, where quite progressive ATI laws have been installed and implemented as a cause of the recommendations of the AMB.
Okay. Now, Dickson, you obviously work very closely with journalists, media institutions in the region and in the country itself. Yes. Can you share with us some success stories and perhaps even challenges in the region that have been highlighted?
Yeah, that's a very important question. We do a number of, platforms that we organize for journalists, access to information campaigners, and would you like me to focus on on the challenges that we have seen or success stories, because there's a lot and I don't know how much time we have.
So a few success stories too, and then some challenges.
Yes, as Freya mentioned, due to some of our advocacy work, we have seen the enactment of very progressive ATI laws, Malawi, Nigeria, and in South Africa. Not the enactment, but the process towards strengthening the implementation of these laws. And we do this together, not only with journalists, but also other campaigners and advocates. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And some of the challenges that you've seen in the region, what are the working conditions like outside Namibia and then also compared to Namibia?
Namibia is not a peculiar environment.
Oh, okay.
Even though there is, Namibia stands very, very far when it comes to freedom of, the press. Mm-hmm. But some of the challenges are quite common regionally, where we see journalists, they work without proper working conditions, without proper contracts, without union representation. That leaves them very vulnerable to precarious working environments and also abuse in some cases. That also impacts on the quality of journalism and the quality of, access to the information they produce for their audiences. Mm-hmm. Also, the question of ethics and professionalism in journalism is affected because of the challenging environments that journalists find themselves. That's one challenge. Mm-hmm. Another, of course, is when it comes to our African Media Barometer, there is very good recommendations, very strong recommendations that could improve media environment and the working conditions of journalists. But there's always a resistance. We have, faced quite a lot of resistance. And it's common, not only in sub-Saharan, in Southern Africa, but also West Africa and other regions. But we keep pushing together with like-minded institutions, journalists who are progressive, and all those organizations that really want to see a stronger media environment and open freedom of expression and access to information environments.
I want to go back to you've raised the issue of ethics, how it is compromised when it comes to the quality of working conditions. Can you please elaborate on that? Because in Namibia we've had people who just throw around accusations that journalists receive brown envelopes. How common is this, and is that part of the ethical dilemma?
That's a very well. There have been a lot of discussions around this, not only in Namibia. We've seen it in other countries where allegations of brown envelope journalism they are very common, where you hear that journalists, some of them get to produce stories or write stories or produce news programs or current affairs programs that favor certain groups or certain institutions, because this is where they are getting, these fake brown envelopes. In some instances where you see, like in the African Media Barometer, where there's always this highlighting of journalists who are really moving away from the core principles of ethical and professional journalism by allowing themselves, I would say, selling their souls to the devil by getting, access to certain resources. And then they start reporting in a manner that promotes certain agendas instead of being objective, reporting as it should be, true stories that are based on facts, and that, which is really the basic tenets of good journalism. Mm-hmm. But then they end up informing citizens, really skewing the stories towards certain groups or certain powers that keep them going. But I think that is also the backdrop of this question of sustainability of media and journalism, where you find that certain media institutions, they are underfunded, or maybe the advertising market in a country is not big enough or sufficient to support the media plurality, or a lot of media organizations then you find out that newsrooms are affected by that, and then journalists are not well paid. They end up, sort of start taking that direction where they get bribes or brand envelopes, so to speak.
Thank you, Dickson. Now, back to you, Freya. So the AfroBarometer Namibia 2022 was now launched last week. Can you just share with us the key findings and what this means for the country's reputation?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the Africa Media Barometer 2022 came as a bit of a surprise to me personally, I must say. I had the honor to attend the whole proceedings of 2 days of discussion. And really, I was quite surprised about the scoring taking place. Actually, quite bad scoring, especially when we look at Sector 1. Sector 1, speaking about the legal frameworks being in place to protect the free media. I had expected much higher scores, but wow, this is where we are. And the discussions really substantiated the results. So basically, maybe to quickly explain that, it was being said that yes, Namibia is the signatory to many treaties and declarations and commitments. So everything seems to be in place, including the new ATI bill. But many of these treaties and bills still have to be enacted. So implementation is the crucial issue that has been criticized quite highly. The lack of implementation, to be more precise. Then again, maybe on a positive note, 2 of the results of our previous AMBs were taken up and mentioned as very positive developments. One being the formation of NAMPO, although, it's not finalized, we all know that, but at least a lot of endeavors have been taking place to get where we are at the moment. And the last AMB pointed out very clearly to the need of the journalist unions for Namibia. So that was highly commended during the discussions, and I also think that's very positive personally. And then another positive development, obviously, that was also being demanded last time, was the ATI bill. We've been waiting for that many years. It's still not where it should be, but at least it's there. So just two positive developments. And then again, maybe on a negative note, that also came as quite a bit of surprise to me, to be honest, all the reports about state interference in journalists' work. I had been under the impression that Namibia is a bit of a heaven for journalists, and maybe it still is. There are many indications that point towards this direction, but apparently we have entered upon a downward trajectory in that regard, and that needs to be closely monitored, I think. If Namibia wants to keep up its second position and number 14 worldwide on the World Press Freedom Index, but obviously also in view of the next AMB. We'll look into that very closely, I think.
Thank you, Freya. Now, Dickson, Freya has just raised the concern about Namibia entering a downward spiral in terms of media freedom. So going back to the findings and the discussions that went on, what do you think does this mean for the country's reputation as a champion of press freedom in general?
Yeah, I think Namibia still has a stellar reputation in terms of press freedom. There's no doubt about that. As Freya said, globally, Namibia is really leading. In Africa is number 1 most of the time, except now with the Seychelles decriminalizing defamation. That was, I think, the major aspect that made the Seychelles to then usurp Namibia's position from number 1 to go to number 2. So I think these discussions, of course, they are quite, some of the results in the AMB, they are quite worrying, but I think it's an opportunity to say, okay, these are the issues that being raised as what could be contributing towards Namibia losing its first position in Africa. So there's an opportunity to engage in dialogue, to engage all stakeholders, to start dialoguing on how do we get these things right so that we can get back to the top. So I think the reputation of Namibia is still intact. And I think there's an opportunity to continue, preserving the gains, but of course to arrest some of these emerging concerns that were raised, as Freya has mentioned. They need to be, addressed not only by government, but, including the participation of the citizens and other stakeholders around media and freedom of expression and access to information. They need to engage closely in a participatory manner and say, what do we need to do? So these are some of the issues that are identified, and I think there's always space for dialogue and there's room for improvement.
Thank you, Dickson. Now, in conclusion, Freya, you've just mentioned that some of the challenges are implementing some of these issues, like the treaties Namibia has signed. And Namibia is indeed known as one of the countries that are having all these. I mean, Namibia has just received an award for having some of the most progressive policies, but Namibia really has a bad reputation when it comes to implementing it. So what is the plan, and who are you going to work with to the recommendations that came from the AfroBarometer? What are they like? Can you share some of that with us? And how will you make this come to life or address what needs to be addressed?
Yeah, very important questions, I think. Let me first of all maybe give a quick idea about implementation, because the AMB is not really as an assessment of government. It's an assessment of the overall media landscape. So it's also looking at journalists' performance, it's looking at editors' performance, it's looking at civil society. And as you will remember, there was quite a lively debate, sometimes contesting debate between the different participants during the AMB. So it's not clearly just focusing at government and pointing to them and saying, this is what you have to do. So what I really like about this year's AMB is the last section, which speaks to the recommendations. I can't show it into the camera, I think, but the very first column clearly shows who already committed to do what. So, and basically, those committing were those present at the panel discussion. So that was a very impressive commitment, I think, by the panelists, including maybe the media ombudsman. He committed to a couple of ideas: how to monitor more closely, how to spearhead a campaign around derogatory remarks about LGBTQI plus communities. Just a very minor recommendation, just to mention it. Action committed to analyze very closely the legislative framework. So basically, all these recommendations already come with kind of assignments to particular civil society organizations that are active in Namibia. And this is so promising, because I think if we want to make progress, it is civil society that is needed. And civil society in Namibia, although it does have its weaknesses, but it's also strong when it comes to commitment. And I'm always, every time now and then, very impressed by what civil society in Namibia actually has been achieving. But you will also see that the column is not complete. So there are additional activities where the panel wasn't sure who could take that up. And I think we have to look very closely into these empty columns and see whether we shouldn't address these issues maybe to particular governmental institutions and discuss with them. As always, I think it will be a matter of public discussion, certainly. It will be a matter of, again, political advisory work, but maybe also of training. For example, we are about to launch our ATI online course, which is meant, actually two courses, one meant addressing civil society representatives, one addressing government officials. So, I think together we can really make a difference here, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much, Freya. So do you have any last words?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I think, as Freya said, the recommendations of the AMB, quite a lot. This year's AMB has a lot of recommendations, and I think we understand why. If you read it from the genesis to the end of it, you see the issues that have been raised, positive versus the negatives, and the recommendations are looking at how do we strengthen the positives and at the same time try to salvage the situation and not allow the negatives to continue going down.
Yes, okay.
So we say that as FES and of course Fesmedia and other partners and stakeholders and like-minded institutions and players, we have an opportunity to interrogate what's happening at the moment and then come up with ideas together and say this is what we can do to improve the situation. We have got we have introduced as Fesmedia what we are calling AMB blogs, where we go further and dig deeper into the issues that have been raised in the AMB, where writers and bloggers can go and really look into these issues further and publish it. So we have a bigger, larger body of knowledge or body of information that we can use to discuss in breakfast meetings or platforms that we can convene. We are available to convene such platforms, to engage with all partners that are interested in addressing the issues that are being raised in the AMB. And of course, as we contribute to the efforts of government to promote freedom of expression, media, press freedom as a fundamental building block for a democratic society. So we are there to really participate and provide such a platform where we can discuss, and we call upon those who are interested, who have read the AMB and understood, and perhaps agree or maybe disagree to what's in there, so that we go further and interrogate what's being said there, and come up on a platform for discussion and dialogue, so that we can address these issues, and Namibia can still remain a beacon of press freedom.
Of course, that should be the highlight. Thank you very much, Dickson and Freya, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was a very pleasant conversation.
Thank you
so
Jemima.
much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for tuning in. It was Freya and Dickson from Friedrich Eberhard Stiftung. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
For many Namibians, a breast cancer diagnosis can feel like a battle they're fighting alone. Remember that we are in this fight together, because you are our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, and our friends. During the month of October, we at RMA would like to encourage you to have a mammogram done, as this helps with earlier detection, increasing the chance of survival, and enabling less severe treatment strategies. Let us unite and raise awareness about breast cancer throughout Namibia.
The My.NA Cars Show provides viewers with the best in-class cars content, engaging interviews, as well as a showcase of the latest cars-related news, products, and services. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact My.NA at synergy.com.na. My.NA Cars, more than just a ride.